Ms. Albert has an MS in Educational Instructional Technology, and just two certifications mentioned would be MOR Leaders Program and Project Management Professional. If you have encountered a disability-related IT barrier, then Ms. Mary Albert session, Reimagining Access Online Learning for a Digital University, will cover this. So please welcome Ms. Mary Albert.
Thank you so much. I am absolutely delighted to be here with you this morning and speaking with you. This will be, I hope, an interactive session. Please post your questions to the chat. I am also delighted to just hear from any of you. You can just speak out your question as well. So I am going to go ahead and get started. I will share my slides and we'll get into a deeper dive on this topic of disability inclusion in online learning. All right, so let me just share. Okay, let me arrange myself.
Good morning.
Good morning. Hello, Charnel.
Hi, I do apologize. I'm just jumping back in, just coming out of another session. But it's so beautiful to see you this morning, Miss Albert and others. Thank you for joining.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. There's just a little bit of a delay in the audio on my side.
Okay, I understand. So I do see that you're ready to present. Dr. Bethel, should I go ahead and introduce?
Mrs. Knott went ahead with the introduction herself.
Oh,
Yeah.
awesome. Thank you so much, Mrs. Knott. So I guess we're ready to go.
Welcome.
Yeah, we're ready to go. Thanks.
All right, so here we go. I'm going to play from the start. Okay, so for this next hour or so, not quite an hour, I am going to be speaking with you and hopefully hearing from you on disability inclusion in online learning. So our focus today is online learning. Let me talk a little bit about the topics. So I'm breaking this presentation into two key topics. The first is I'm going to give you a disability overview and how different disabilities impact learning online. And then we are going to move into key practices in online instructional design, which are the same practices for all digital accessibility. So you can apply these to all different aspects of your online instruction and also anything else that you produce that is digital. So a little bit more detail about me. I'll give you my bona fides here. I've been working at Princeton University for over 20 years. I lead the program in digital accessibility that is within our Office of Information Technology. I work with staff and offices across the institution. I spend a lot of my time teaching and training, working on policy, and also assessing risk for the university. But I think even more relevant for our needs today are that I am an instructional designer myself. I have an advanced degree in instructional technologies. I've been doing it for so long that I've learned, I don't know, at least 20 to 30 different technologies at this point. It's one of the beauties of teaching in this way. You're always having to learn new tools. So I'm also the author of the online course for the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. This is an exam preparation course for accessibility certification. And there are about 1,000 people enrolled in that course globally at any particular time. And I also teach an in-depth training class at Princeton to prepare our staff to become accessibility certified. I am happy to say that most of the people in our Office of Disability Services have gone through this training and are certified, as are our instructional designers in our Center for Teaching and Learning. Princeton itself does not publish many full courses online, the massive open online courses, but every course is in the learning management system. Professors and teaching assistants use the system to whatever degree they determine within their course. Everybody at minimum has their syllabus, course readings, slides, other materials that are used in the course. So depending upon the instructor's design, some of that online can be synchronous or it can be asynchronous. So there's a lot of flexibility. I am also, a teacher and trainer. I'm a certified teacher, and I have taught students with disabilities. So I understand what it is like from the instructor's perspective to make learning equitable for all students. Okay, so this is the mission of the Digital Accessibility Program at Princeton. It very much mirrors what Mrs. Brown from the Office of Disability Services was saying in her wonderful introduction and overview. So in our program, we say that accessibility is a shared responsibility and it must be standard practice. And why? Why do we do that at a university where digital accessibility is highly dependent on thousands of people across our institution to make it happen? I have a very small staff. There are only 3 of us. So it has to be a shared responsibility. Also, it needs to be standard practice because accessibility practices are good practices. They are especially important and necessary for people who have disabilities, but those same practices turn out to be excellent and useful for most people. Everyone benefits. So why all this? It's because we want and need people to thrive. Students come to a university, whether it's virtual or in person, in order to gain an education, and that education has a profound impact on their lives. They are here to thrive, and we want them to thrive in their learning. We want everybody else to thrive as well, right? Whether we are professors or staff or researchers, everyone needs to be able to do what it is they are meant to do. So in the case of learning, of course, that's thinking, learning the materials, right? Gaining this education. And we want technology to assist that and get out of the learner's way. So we do that through design. So that's a key point that I'm making in this presentation. It's about good design. So we're going to take a bit of a deep dive here into just what is disability. I'll give you an overview of that and what that means for us as online educators. So this is one definition. This one comes from the US Centers for Disease Control. So at core, it is an impairment, whether in somebody's body or their mind. I will here point out that the mind and the brain are part of the body. And the reason I point that out is because there is an improving recognition of disabilities such as psychological disabilities that are just as impactful in someone's ability to learn as other physical disabilities. Okay, so this impairment makes it more difficult than for people who don't have that impairment to do certain activities, such as walking, reading, and it makes it more difficult to just interact with the world in general. And of course, when you're learning, you have a lot of interaction, right? The mind has to be very active. So here are key effects of disabilities. It affects learning, simply thinking, not that thinking is simple, but thinking overall, the ability to remember, communicating, hearing, vision. Those are the two disabilities that people tend to think about most often, are hearing and vision, but also movement. So for example, using your hands, operating a keyboard, if you have a movement disability, that can be difficult and tiring. Mental health and social relationships. So why do I bring up social relationships in this context of online learning? When students are doing collaborative learning, that, a disability can really have an impact on that, the ability to participate in that collaborative learning. Okay, any questions on that before I move on?
Okay, there are no questions in the chat. Is there anyone in here that feels that they need clarification on what is a disability? We're all good. We can give us some thumbs up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for monitoring the chat. Okay, next key point. Disabilities can be permanent. Most people tend to think of them as permanent, but they can also be temporary. Think of the case of a student who's gotten an injury. All of a sudden, they can't use their hand, or they're having to use crutches or something like that. Someone who's had surgery, for example, eye surgery, still need to get their work done. But most disabilities actually are invisible. We don't know. When we are teaching or speaking with or interacting with any group, I guarantee you there are people in that group who have invisible disabilities. So these are the learning disabilities, cognitive disabilities, neurological disabilities. They can also be hearing disabilities and sight disabilities. So that's an important point that I like to make, because we need to be aware that those disabilities exist even though they aren't obvious to us in our observation. Next key point. Disability is common. It is an inherent part of being human. So it depends on which source you reference, but World Health Organization is a good one. The WHO estimates that about 1 in 6 people have a disability. So if you're teaching a class of 24 students, assume that 4 of them have a disability that you need to plan for and design your learning for. Also, people with disabilities are the world's largest minority group. It's a very diverse group of people because the range of disabilities is so great. But I really like to point this out too, because traditionally, people like me who work in diversity and inclusion and equity, I used to have to argue for a number of years to please include people with disabilities in considering minorities. It actually is the world's largest minority group, but one that only very recently have people started to consider with designing for people with disabilities in mind. So disability, not surprisingly, is prevalent in higher education. So you can see on this pie chart that I have broken, it's broken down. The source for this is EDUCAUSE, and technology organization, the largest technology organization for higher education technology. And most of the disabilities are learning disabilities and mental health disabilities. I was surprised myself when I first saw this information, that 46% of disability in higher education is disabilities are learning disabilities. So that is absolutely central to what we need to design for, since it is so prevalent. And here's another interesting piece of information, that only 44% of students with disabilities register with disability services. So that's less than half. So frequently what happens is, when students finish high school and move into a college and university, they don't want to disclose disability, for peer pressure reasons, for just feeling that they've outgrown it, or, there are social, and, these personal reasons for it. But when I think about it from the practical standpoint of creating learning for these students, I have to keep it ever so more in mind, because about half of my students that I know who have disabilities have actually registered with disability services and can get accommodations as a result. So what I'm talking about here is designing from the get-go, right, for disability, for all these different needs, so that we still support all types of learners, even though they're not registered and they're not asking for accommodations. So this is a point that comes from what we call user experience, the point of interaction. It also comes from disability studies. Where does functional disability occur? So it happens at the point of interaction. Okay, so I can have a health condition and doesn't have to have an impact on what I'm doing, because what I'm doing is designed already to, make that a moot point. I can just do what I need to do. But if the condition that I have comes up against a barrier, so if I'm blind or I have low vision and I'm learning online, and the content is not structured in a way that my assistive technology can read it out properly, now there's a barrier to my learning. Now I'm disabled. So it's not just about health conditions. It's about the environment, and it's about social barriers, societal barriers. So there is a classic example. It comes from the U.S. in Denver, Colorado, a large city in the west of the country. In the 1970s, disability activists were protesting that the bus system was not accessible. So people in wheelchairs could not, there were no lifts, to get into the bus. And also, they couldn't get on and off the sidewalk safely. Sidewalk, sidewalks had no, those, I can't remember what they're called, the little ramps, so the activists one night went out with sledgehammers, and they just destroyed the corners of a bunch of sidewalks to create, they're called curb cuts, to create those curb cuts. So that did lead to action. Curb cuts started to become a standard in building of sidewalks. Sidewalks were retrofit. But so that barrier occurs much less often than it used to. But this is also a beautiful example of how designing for disability improves access for everyone. So it's not just people in wheelchairs who use curb cuts. People who are pushing carts or strollers or walking their bikes. Some people ride their bikes on them, but they're used by all different people, and people don't even really think about curb cuts anymore, but they've only been around for about 50 years in the United States. Okay, so barriers. What is our job as instructors? It's to reduce those barriers and eliminate wherever we can. So this is why accessibility must be central in online learning. It is not a nice to have. It's a requirement. The beauty of online education for many people, and here in particular for people with disabilities, is that it increases access. It has been life-changing. The ability to get an education online, to participate with other students, with professors from, wherever someone is, maybe their home. It just wasn't possible before in the way it is now. So many more people can be educated. It is profound and in my mind, beautiful. It is a beautiful solution. So let's talk about the accessibility of online learning. Accessibility affects students' engagement. And again, I'm echoing what Mrs. Brown said. I was delighted. This was already in my presentation. Students' ability to engage with the learning, to engage with others, to engage with the instructor. It affects that. It affects their basic academic performance. Everyone should be given the opportunity to perform well. You need to have access in a way that you can access it. So again, here I'll talk about people who are deaf, for example. They need captions or perhaps a sign language interpretation, like Mrs. Lunn is providing in this session, in order to access the information and the learning. But it also affects degree completion. It is heartbreaking when someone starts their degree and then can't finish it. For so many stories of frustration from students with disabilities who cannot complete their degrees because the learning itself is not accessible to them. So this is a tremendous opportunity to educate more people in better ways. So now we're going to get into more nitty gritty. So I'm not going to cover every single type of disability, but I'm going to talk about common disabilities that affect learning. So I've listed them here. You may have heard of some of these, you may not have. Dyslexia affects reading and ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, is fairly common and is more and more diagnosed. Executive functioning disorder can be part of ADHD. It can also be on its own. That's difficulty with organizing information, for example, just keeping up with deadlines, keeping up with your calendar. Anxiety and depression have a huge impact on people's learning. Dyscalculia is a math disability, and dysgraphia is a writing disability. So let's talk a little bit about the effects on learning of these disabilities. So right at the top, I have put reading. Reading is fundamental, and you have to do a lot of reading as a student in higher education. So if you are having trouble decoding words or comprehending words, that is very, very tough. It is exhausting, but there are effective methods for treating dyslexia. Very good reading approaches. So, but it can slow people down, even if students who have dyslexia have received all of that training. Their ability to process, it's going to take more energy for them to process reading. Okay, again, writing. As professors, I'm sure that you encounter this regularly. Writing skills that are not good. I have worked hard in my own online training course to make the language, frankly, less academic sounding. That is where I'm comfortable. I work, at an Ivy League university. There is a great formality in our language, but that can be a barrier. And so clear, I mean, I'm speaking as the instructor, but and that being difficult for me, someone who has a lot of experience writing, and my work to make my writing clearer, simpler, and I don't mean, silly, I just mean simple in terms of clarity and getting right to the point. I have a lot of compassion for students who have difficulty writing, and it is a skill that has to be practiced over years, and in higher education in particular. So students who have difficulty writing have a harder time, just as students in higher ed. Okay, math. Memory. So memory can be affected by different kinds of learning disabilities, but anxiety and depression, I want to bring these up because it isn't necessarily obvious that those conditions also affect students' memories, learners' memories, as well as concentration. So someone who's highly stressed, and people can be stressed because they've got these other disabilities as well, right? They don't necessarily have a psychological disability, but just having to manage with your disability can in itself create some anxiety. So anything that we can do as instructors to make things clear, I'll talk a little bit about simplification too, to help students focus and help them absorb information and then process that information, right? Reflect on what they are learning. These are the difficult mental tasks of teaching and learning. Okay, any questions on this?
I don't see anything in the chat, but go ahead.
Okay, great.
No, Dr. Bethel?
Yeah, I was interested to see in the chat when you were talking about temporary disabilities.
Yes.
One of our persons, either from HR or from the physical plant unit, was saying that there were examples of when uh, employees returned to work after an injury and needed the exact type of accommodation that you were referring to. And actually, there was a back and forth between herself and Erin talking about what they can be done in the future. So already the presentation is bringing up pertinent issues that we're experiencing on a day-to-day basis here.
Good. I am glad to hear that. So it's when people have temporary disabilities that my group tends to hear about it more, because people who did not have a disability didn't, give really any thought to things. But suddenly, the fact that they can't open a door because the door's, automatic opener isn't working or doesn't exist is now suddenly a very pertinent problem for them. in my work, it's also the place where we tend to get people who become advocates for accessibility because they're frankly outraged that things are not accessible anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Sorry.
it
Oh,
really
yeah.
can present
Oh,
an opportunity for empathy for
Yes.
when we experience temporary disabilities and basically have to walk in the shoes of
Yes.
students, faculty, and staff on campus who live with this every day of their lives. Dr. Hines, you had your hand up. Go ahead. Just open your mic and go ahead and speak.
I do, and thank you so much. It's good to really hear someone from Princeton. I will ask a personal question. Are you familiar with Mirai Geno, an
No,
academic librarian at
no,
Princeton?
but if you could put that in the chat and I'll write it down.
I sure will.
They are a librarian at Princeton?
Academic librarian.
Academic librarian? Oh,
Yes.
no, but thank you for that. I'd like to make the connection. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. So that my question is, I hear you a lot on the physical side, spaces, doors,
Yes.
apertures, what have you. I wish to speak to the content areas
Mm-hmm.
of when you're dealing with instructional strategies. For
Mm-hmm.
someone, for example, with an intellectual
Mm-hmm.
uh, delay, then what is your strategy to have them access world languages?
Yeah. Yeah.
What is your strategy to have them access American history?
Yes. So I am going to get to the best practices for that, but
Awesome.
yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Because I mean,
Thank
my
you.
area is digital accessibility.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Lovely. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so what I probably was, and that's why I asked you about Ms. Geno, was the linkage when you mentioned that you also are there for faculty.
Yes.
So how would you, what's the strategy for faculty support when they are wanting to communicate content to
Yes.
someone with that disability? And thank you so much.
Yes,
for-
yes.
for
So
your-
yes, yeah. Thank you, Dr. Hines. So the strategy for helping faculty with this at Princeton is we have a group called the McGraw Center for Teaching and Learning, with instructional designers, and we that group provides direct support to faculty. So how do you make content accessible? So at Princeton, we the learning management system is we use Canvas. I know that you use Moodle. They're both good systems. There is a lot of support built into those systems, right? So theoretically, if you were just putting the content in, following the guardrails that are in place, content should be accessible. But there are best practices. So I'm going to talk about these, but so for example, I mean, this isn't in my slides, but slides, for example, PowerPoint slides, the design of slides is important, not overwhelming students. You can see that my own slides, so this is actually a fairly busy slide. Most of my slides are simple, but the instructional designers in the Center for Teaching and Learning do train and support faculty directly. Princeton does not have an overarching faculty training mandate, right? So all the support is there and it is encouraged. We're very careful about the system itself and any add-ons. So for added functionality, we are very careful about testing those. There are occasional exceptions because a function is needed for that particular class. So a student would get an accommodation as opposed to accessibility already being built into the content. Okay.
Thank you so kindly.
Yes, you're welcome.
Dr.
We have one more person.
Oh,
Dr.
okay.
Carmichael, please go ahead and open your mic.
yes, okay. Thank you very much. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Right. As you spoke, first of all, let me just say excellent presentation.
Thank you.
What is there seems to be a very close relationship, or shall we say there are parallel between a disability and a deficiency.
Mhm.
Um, from what I've heard so far, a disability seems to be defined in terms of some, I will call it yardstick measure. So, for example, one would imagine that the average person or the
Yes.
average child should be able to read a simple sentence by the age of X, whatever X that is, I don't know, 5 years old or what have you. If a person um, cannot read by the age of X,
Mhm.
then there are two things that you can say. That person obviously has a deficiency in being able to read. Um, but does that person also have a disability? For example, I would say right now, even though I'm a professor of computer science,
Mhm.
my math is horrible. I will throw my hands up and say that. My math is not fantastic. No, is it that I have a disability, which you call dyscalculia, or is it that I have a deficiency because I had bad math teachers?
All
So
right.
please, what I want to know is how do you define between a deficiency and the disability? And should the approach be different? Thank you very much.
Yes. So, sociological question, medical question, a question of access. So if I have had a poor education, that doesn't mean that I have a disability. If my math education is poor, it doesn't mean that I inherently have a learning disability for math. It means that I wasn't given a good education, right? Does that ultimately uh, disable me in certain contexts? I'm uh, yes, from that kind of that functional that or that perspective, but it doesn't mean that I have a medical condition or a that yeah, I'm going to say medical condition. So people who study, disability studies have um, different a different perspective that is very socially based about disability. There is something called the medical model of disability, which is okay, there's a problem inherent in that person's health, right? Um, and there are lots of implications for that, right? And a shift away from a medical model to what is called the social model or the biopsychosocial model. Um, the social model in particular has been the key to change societally for people with disabilities. So in in getting services to be available, in just having disability be recognized, in the creation of laws and the enforcement of those laws. So, hmm, um, so disability is on a spectrum, but inherently, essentially, disability is about something functioning different, functioning outside the norm um, of the general population. So the general population has two hands. Somebody only has one hand, that's a disability because the world is designed for people who have two hands. Um, so I hope that answers the question.
Yes, please. It definitely does. That okay, right? Yes, please. I really that basically wanted. So, for example, in the idea of a mental disability,
Mhm.
I suppose you could say then that, for example, um, if a child is not able to read a sentence by the age of X, as my
Right.
prior example was, but it was just showing that the child had a horrid English teacher,
Yeah.
as opposed to that child has an inherent problem such as dyslexia.
Yes.
That's the difference between basically a disability and a deficiency. But I suppose for de facto purposes, could you treat both the same? That's my real question. Or
Ah,
is mhm. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so that is an excellent question. And I'm going to say that it does depend on the context. So I have a colleague who does who does some volunteer teaching. And when he's teaching math, he said basically no matter what the title of his course is, he's always helping students with basic calculation and is, horrified that there are students who get to college who are still struggling with some basic calculation. So, for example, the latest example he gave me was the difficulty understanding negative numbers. And so what he has done is instead of presenting the number line horizontally, he flipped it vertically so it looks like a thermometer and talked to the students about, the temperature outside. And he said it was incredible that all the students, of course, understood that it could get below zero. So that's negatives. And in that way, they understood it. But that is him as a teacher helping the students make up for deficiencies in their education, not something, not because they have dyscalculia, sorry. Okay, so in the interest of time, can we move on?
Yes, yes.
All right, so let's talk about universal design for learning. If you have been involved in instructional design, if you've done some of this research, you may be familiar already with universal design for learning. The essentials are the idea is that accessible design is good design, and I've talked about this already, that it supports many types of people. But the UDL is a framework that considers the diverse needs of learners, and the whole goal is to remove barriers to learning. And the way that you as an instructor are encouraged to use universal design is to provide variety. So that variety is in engaging learners, motivating learners. So some learners, are motivated by high grades. Others are motivated by understanding, there's some practical application to what they are learning, or it could help them with their career goals, whatever it is. So it's just providing those different motivators, different ways of engaging. Some people are engaged, through visual information, some through stories, some through, just reading. Literally, some people like, reading things, on a timeline versus getting some large context and then diving in from different perspectives. So it's offering these different ways. Again, in presenting information, and then some variety in how learners demonstrate their knowledge. Does it, does it need to be a paper? Can it be a presentation of a different type, for example? And I'm not saying that sometimes, if it's a writing course, yes, you're going to have to write papers, right? But it's to consider and allow for this variety in order to capture more of the students, to get them interested, get them involved, get them able to access that content, that learning. All right, so I just want to talk about two disabilities in particular that really rely on assistive technologies. So visual disabilities are the first, and visual disabilities are on a spectrum. Everything from, just needing some glasses to being completely blind. Oh, is there a question? Okay, no, it just sounds like some audio's on. Also, color vision deficiency. Red-green color blindness in particular is pretty common in about 8% of males. So that does become important for how you present information. Here are different types of technologies. You may know of these or not know of them. A very common one is a screen magnifier. It could sit out on, outside of someone's screen, or it could also be inherent in the software. Screen readers, I bring up screen readers because this is key for how we design for people who are low vision and blind, or people who have reading disabilities can also use screen readers. The digital content gets read out loud, and that's really important for structuring the content that you present. Screen readers will, they can skim through topics, for example, so you have to make sure that you're using headings properly, so that students who rely on these technologies can skim and jump around in content. Okay, there are Braille devices for students who use Braille. It basically types out the Braille as it's going along. You know, that's again, a key here is ensuring that your digital content is properly structured. So it makes the text tactile, but these keyboards here, they just move along as the content is moving along, and so the student can, the user can read them. And then voice recognition is very important for using your voice to control your computer or your phone, but also in creating speech to text. So a student with a visual disability or a text disability can dictate what they want to write instead of actually having to use their keyboard. Okay, next are auditory disabilities. As I said, it may not be obvious. It frequently isn't obvious who has an auditory disability, but again, there's a range. It includes being hard of hearing or being completely deaf. And so some of the technologies that people use are hearing aids. They're becoming less and less obvious. Cochlear implants, but texting is very important and used a lot with people who have auditory disabilities. So the written word is key here. In online, in-person situations, there are also these personal devices that connect to assistive listening systems. Okay, we're going to move on. So now let's get into content best practices. These are what I am going to cover. And there are 7 here. I'm going to get into each of them. So I want to talk first about simplicity and the beauty of simplicity for everyone. So I talked about this before, using headings, using lists, but also just using good spacing and aligning your text left. These things help you concentrate on the content, not on the presentation. Captions and transcripts, key. Closed captions were designed for people who are deaf and hard of hearing, but they are used by so many people. Imagine being in a library where it has to be quiet, or you're at home and you can't interrupt other people, but so you can't have the sound on. So you rely on captions. Captions are also really good for people who have language disabilities because they can hear and read at the same time. People who need to process information more slowly can do that. They can start and stop a video, for example, or a transcript. They can go back into a transcript and reread and move at their own pace. High contrast colors. You can see from the examples here, you can look for yourself about where does it get hard to read. If you have low vision, contrast is very important. So I encourage high contrast. Doesn't have to be black and white, but I can tell you if I'm teaching in person, I frequently use dark slides because the rooms around campus are bright and white. and people with visual disabilities, especially low vision, really benefit from the contrast of having the screen, you know, the screen that I'm projecting onto being dark, so it's separate from the wall, and they can see the screen better that way. And then the text is light. Do not rely on color alone. A great way to test your content is to test it in grayscale. So if you look at these examples, the first example, red and green common, colorblind issue. You see it in the center there. Well, that's what it could look like to someone who is colorblind. How are you supposed to know which is Y, which is Y, and which is Z? And then the good example, the best practice is over there on the right side of the screen. You simply make the lines different from each other, and then it doesn't matter what color they are. Here it's, circle and dotted line versus a line with triangles. Next, write meaningful alternative text. You may have heard it referred to as alt text. But what is important about describing images is describing them in the context of, the article, the reading, the learning, the page that you're on. So yes, this is a dog. It happens to be a Norwalk Terrier, but I may need to say more about this dog depending on what what I'm writing about. So you can read those examples yourself. But just remember that context is the key, describing the visual. And, it's not just images, it's charts and graphs as well. Also, you want to write meaningful links that work out of context. So again, this goes back to assistive technologies that students may be using. If your links say click here, and a student is reading those links in a list, as screen readers allow them to do, they won't know what that link is going to. Here are some other best practices. Don't use a full URL. Include the file type if it's not a website, so students know what they're going to. It's going to be a document, it's going to be a slide, etc. All right, so now we're going to have just a little bit of fun. I am going to give you 3 seconds to skim the next slide. Here we go. Okay. Whoops, that is not what I wanted to show you. I need to go back here. Okay, what did you get from that reading? How many links?
3?
Okay, what were they?
I have no idea.
That is my point. All right, most of these just say click here. All right, now we're going to try it again. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Were we able to get any of the links?
I saw 4. Don't know what they were though.
Okay, so
And that's only because I saw the underline, and so because I saw underline, I have figured it had to be a link.
yes.
But what was it? I don't know.
Yes. Okay, so
I think it's someone on undergraduate admissions.
yes,
Although
good
it could
job.
be.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right.
I saw international something, I believe.
Okay. But there was more context there. So let's look at the difference between these two. A lot of click here's in this first example. And then one very long URL. And if you were using a screen reader technology that would read the whole thing out, it would be absolutely painful to listen to. So now this is rewritten with the links being meaningful, and they would work out of context. So imagine that you had a list of these links: undergraduate admission, financial aid, graduate school, and international students. It would be much more obvious where you would be going if you click those links. Okay, I'm going to fly through these. I know we're just at about time. If you use tables, make sure they are accessible. This means defining the column row and the header row, add a summary, and do not use tables as layout devices. They are not for layout. They should only be used for data. Okay? Don't use images of text. People who rely on assistive technologies that read out screens can't read this text, even though it's beautiful over the last 50 years, the endowment, etc. That's okay if you have excellent vision. If you're on a phone, it's too small, and if you're using a screen reader, forget it. You can't access it at all. All right, this is going to cause a little bit of controversy because I am well aware that online courses are very full of PDFs because of readings, right? Being in PDF format. The problem with PDFs is that they are most usually not accessible to people who use assistive technologies. Okay, there's also the issue of using them on small screens. Students do use their phones and other small screens. So on one side of this slide, you can read the gibberish that results from trying to access this PDF using a screen reader. That is not what you want students to be reading. Dr. Pinder.
Yes, thank you so much, Miss Albert. Your presentation is excellent. And you brought something to my attention that I constantly think about when I'm designing my courses, but I always start off wanting to do it, but I never remember, is how to plan PowerPoints and other documents for people that use their phones. Do you have any best practices? Maybe you probably ran over because I stepped away for a moment,
Yeah.
or sites that I can go to remind me of how to design using those techniques, please?
Yeah, okay. So first of all, there are a lot of resources out there on slide design. You can just Google. Microsoft itself has very good techniques for slide design. Overall, I would say as much as you can, keep the slides clear and simple. Do not overwhelm each slide with information. What you brought up the phone in particular. Students are definitely going to look at the slides on their phone. So that I think is the key best practice. If you need to make your slides fully accessible to people who use assistive technologies that require they be structured perfectly, there are checkers built in. So to Microsoft PowerPoint, the application itself, you can use the checker, and then that actually gives you advice on how to fix up the slides, how to make them accessible.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so PDF. So if possible, don't use a PDF. So in your learning management system, can it be just text on a page in the system? There you go, if you can do that. Another option is to provide two different formats. So if something has to be a PDF, but you also want it to be more accessible and you're not going to remediate what's called tagging the PDF, you can provide a Word document. A lot of blind people prefer Word documents. That's another option. Another is, sometimes you really just do need the PDF. It should be tagged properly. At Princeton, we have a librarian who will tag PDFs and other materials for students. They work with our accommodations office, but that is a skill. So again, try to keep it simple wherever you can. All right, those are my key techniques. You can go to digital.accessibility.princeton.edu. We have a lot of information there that also include these practices. So, my goal was to give you just some key practices, and this could take an entire semester course, right, to really dive into all this. So it was really to give you the overview. But happy to take your questions and discuss now. I think I will stop sharing so that I can see more of you and see the chat. Oh, yes, we'll put that link in the chat. I will pull it up right now and copy it in for you.
So while she's doing that, does anyone want to open up their microphone, give comments, have questions? And then Dr. Bethel will continue with final remarks pertaining to naming devices. And then we will do the vote of thanks. Anyone in the room would like to open up their mic who may have spoken already or have not said anything? This is the time now to jump in.
So just one thing, please. I would like to know why is it that PDFs are so user hostile in terms of disability users? Why is it that Microsoft Word, sorry, why is it that PDFs are so screen reader hostile?
Okay, yeah. That is a strong way to describe it, but frankly, after this many years, I think I do feel pretty strongly about it. So the problem with PDFs is that PDFs are designed for the print world. Okay, they're for layout. They were never intended for being read online. And so developing these files for a different universe, the in-person printed universe, which is not where we are online. We're in the digital realm. And so it is better to use file types that are designed for this world that we're in. And so, most of my work and my team's work is around websites and applications. Of course, the learning management system is an application, but it's why we recommend, wherever possible, use what is already inherently in the system. So if you're publishing web pages, use a web page. Consider why it must be a PDF. So it'll lay out unless it's very carefully tagged, right? So that means you've got to add all this metadata to the PDF, and you need to know how to do it. It's not a simple skill. So if that metadata, if that tagging isn't done, and it almost never is, students who use assistive technologies, people who use assistive technologies, get a bunch of garbled information. It's not that they can't read it, it's that they can't read it in order necessarily. You saw that in the one slide that I presented, what it did to the text, to a screen reader. It made no sense at all. So that is, that can feel pretty hostile. It cuts people off from what they're trying to read. Yeah,
Thank you
so
very
that's
much. Yes, thank you very much.
Yep, you're welcome. So, the questions just popped up in the chat. People lean toward PDF to ensure content doesn't move. Yes, so that is not a guarantee at all. PDFs are very easy to take apart. Anything that's on a screen can be taken apart. It's a digital file. It does not guarantee the safety of that information at all.
I just want to underscore the message that you gave earlier about using the tools of the LMS. Browsers have screen readers built into them, and the easiest type of document that they can screen read are HTML documents. So wherever you can, in your learning management system, create an HTML page with the content that you're trying to deliver, the better it is for the users, screen readers to access that information.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Bethel. Yes, that's exactly it. HTML is the language of the web.
Okay. So if there are no other questions, Dr. Bethel, shall I give a vote of thanks to our special guest, Ms.
If
Albert, who we
Do
will
you,
see again?
if you do
Miss
not mind,
Robinson?
I think there's a question in the chat that spoke to
All right,
the
go ahead.
benefits of using tables. I think
Okay.
the presenter had said not to use uh, tables for something. It's in the
Oh,
chat.
yes. So let me see. So tables should be used for structured data, right? I mean, that data doesn't have to be numerical, right? But there people have a tendency to use tables as a presentation layout device.
Correct.
They should not be used for presentation layout. You should use what is inherent in the system that you're using to manage the layout of your content.
Excellent, and thank you.
Thank you. Go
Miss
ahead, Dr.
Robinson?
Brown. Go ahead.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Miss
Oh, go ahead.
Mrs. Albert?
I'll
Yes.
give you.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Erin.
I'll yield to you. Go ahead. I'll respond.
Okay. I didn't have a question, but I just wanted to make
Be-
a comment
Sorry,
that I
Dr. Pender, before you go on, between Aaron and Dr. Pender, decide which of you will be commenting or questioning, because this really will have to be the last one, as we are over time and our next presenters are already in the meeting to start the next session. So whichever one of you decide, and you guys can go ahead.
well, I only had a comment, so I'll yield to Dr. Brown if she has a question.
We
Thank
are
you.
so kind. I didn't have a question either, but what I quickly wanted to say was thank you. A lot of times when we say these things, persons still are like, but what do you mean? And you broke it down so wonderfully, and it gave so many wonderful resources. So thank you.
It is my pleasure. Thank you for the very important work that you all are doing.
And I just want to say also, Miss Albert, I mean, we connected when I connected with you guys at the Enabling Conference, and I think it was a wonderful experience, and I just had to bring you back to everybody, minus the cold, and so that people can experience what I experienced. And I just want to say very much from the bottom of our hearts, thank you for your time and the information, and we look forward to engaging with you more at the panel discussion tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Robinson. I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.
Thanks again, Ms. Albert. That was a fantastic presentation, and it really it provides an undergirding for the work we're trying to do to increase accessibility in online and face-to-face learning here at UB. Before we begin the next session, I'm just going to quickly ask again for participants, if you are recorded as Charnel Cox Robinson, please click on the participants icon at the bottom of the screen. You should see to your right a panel with all of the different participants in the meeting. Your name should be at the top of that list. If you are seeing your name appear as Charnel Cox Robinson, hover over your name, click the More drop-down box, and you should see Rename. Select Rename and type your name into the box so that we can identify who you are. Thank you, and we apologize for the mix-up with the registrations. Mrs. Robinson, you can go ahead.